So in this case, we're going to solve for s, and I have 9s squared plus 2 equals 2. So we're going to say that we have, when we're using PEMDAS to solve for a variable, instead of moving forward, we're gonna move backward. So I have 9s squared plus 2 equals 2. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I had a positive 2, so I'm left with 9s squared equals 0. And because I'm multiplying the 9, now I'm going to divide by 9. So I have 9s squared equals 0. Divide by 9, s squared equals 0. And now we're going to take the square root. So this is the most important part of this lesson. So whenever you have an s squared, you take the square root to get the individual variable, because we're solving for s, not s squared. So when I take the square root of one side, you're going to have to take the square root of another side. So now I get s equals 0 in this case. So the question it was asking us is, how many real solutions does the equation have? Well, in this case, since s equals 0, it only has one real solution. Okay, so we're going to asking you to solve for m. I have m squared minus 25 equals 0. So from here, I'm going to say that I have m squared minus 25 equals 0. And I'm going to use PEMDAS, but I'm going to work backwards. So I need to bring the 25 to the right-hand side. And when I do that, because I have a negative, I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So plus 25 plus 25. M squared equals 25. Now we're going to take the square root of m squared so that I have the variable m on its own, because we're going to solve for m. So as I do that, I'm going to have m. So here's what happens. Not only do you have one solution, but you're going to have two solutions in this case, because I'm going to have, I know that when I take the square root of 25, I know that 5 times 5 is equal to 25. And I also know that negative 5 times negative 5 is equal to 25. So when I take the square root of 25, I can get a positive solution and I can get a negative solution. So in this case, I'm saying that m equals 5 and m equals negative 5. So it says write your answers as integers, proper or improper fractions in the simplest form. So you would enter 5 and negative 5. Because again, when I have m squared, I'm going to have two solutions. Okay, here's another equation. It says solve for d. I have 81d squared minus 36 equals 0. And I want integers, proper fractions in the simplest form. So again, we use PEMDAS and we go in the opposite direction. So I say 81 d squared minus 36 equals 0. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. So I get 81 d squared equals 36. I'm going to divide both sides by 81. So now I have d squared equals 36 divided by 81. So just like in the first example, we're going to take the square root of both parts of the fraction. So to get d on its own, so again, this is just a little side note. Whenever you have something squared, to get it on its own, you just take the square root because they cancel each other out. So I'm going to take the square root of d squared Okay, so now I know that I have two solutions. So I say d equals, the symbol for two solutions is going to be a positive and a negative. And if I take the square root of 36, I get 6 over the square root of 81, which is 9. I do have to simplify this fraction. So when I do this, it's going to say equals positive and negative. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, or the top and the negative by 3, and I'm going to get 2/3. So d equals positive and negative 2/3. So the way that you would put this into your Excel is saying 2 divide 3 and negative 2 divide 3. Okay, so last one, it says how many real solutions does the equation have? So here's the rule. You cannot have a negative under the square root. So here's what that looks like. You cannot have a negative number underneath the square root. This is a no-no. And that's unfortunately what we're going to have here. So w squared plus 37 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 37 from both sides. So I get w squared equals negative 37. We have to take the square root of both sides to get w on its own because we're solving for w here. So w squared with the square root. So now I say w equals a positive and a negative square root of negative 37. So here's what you need to know. So since I have this rule that we cannot have a negative under a square root, which is a negative number, we can say that this is not a real solution. All right, see you in class.